Hello and welcome to Realms Edge Gaming. In this episode, I wanted to talk to you about the Broken Realms narrative story that was released on the 24th of December, which was titled In the Deep, Dark Mountain. So, I recently got thinking about the story because it made me, when I read it initially, I thought it was a really good story, but I didn't really think too much of it. It was only recently when 2 Plus Tough currently announced that they were doing a lore writing competition for a story set in Gur that it kind of got me thinking. So for the competition, there's a couple more days to enter if it's something that you're interested in doing. And I can highly recommend 2 Plus Tough as an amazing channel for anything to do with Age of Sigmar lore. It's a really good channel, really informative, and if you're not subscribed to it, it's well worth checking out. But when I was looking at the kind of the detail behind it, where it says about being set in Gur, it got me thinking because, if I'm honest, I'm not too familiar with that as a realm. So I was thinking, what do I have that would help me as a resource to kind of research a little bit about it? And then I thought, I've got my Sons of Behemat Battletome, because I remember that a lot of the story is kind of set in that realm. And when I was reading it, I came across on page 17 a short story titled Siege of the Tuskvault. And the names reminded me of something. It got me thinking, and I remembered, it was back on the 24th of December when Games Workshop released the narrative story in the Deep Dark Mountain, that it was the same characters. And the stories, the way that they were written, I would say there's maybe a day in between them. The stories continue on from each other, starting with the one from the Battletome, the Siege of Tuskvault, and then ending with the narrative piece in the Deep Dark Mountain. And it made me think, if we would see maybe some of the models or characters mentioned in the story appear later in the Broken Realms narrative arc. As I said, there is a kind of only a short period of time that elapses between the two stories being written. So it's feasible that the kind of factions that are mentioned, the characters that are mentioned, would appear later on in our Broken Realms kind of narrative as it carries onwards, because it hints very strongly about the Siege of Excelsis, which I've kind of hypothesized that might be the next book with a focus on Gordrak. So let's take a look at a summary of the Siege of the Tuskvault before we continue with the Deep Dark Mountain, and then talk about what clues there are, what's interesting, and what the future could hold for the Destruction faction and the Broken Realm story. So basically what it is, the Tuskvault story in the Sons of Behemat Battletome is all about Sigmar's Stormvaults when they're revealed. And it's about Skragrott, the Loon King. He actually assembles a huge force of destruction. It's massive. It's so big that even Gordrak agrees to lead it. And the Merg brothers, who are the Mega Gargants, are recruited. And the reason why they're going after this Stormvault is because Skragrott says that, the Bad Moon has told him that there is the Basha Shard, which is a fragment of Gorkamorka's own club that splintered off during his fight with Sigmar, and it's been sealed in this Tuskvault. And if they want to get it, it's something that's going to give whoever finds it the power of Gorkamorka. Now, Skragrott realises that he would be too small to wield it, but being a devious little blighter, he realises that a Mega Gargant, if he could cast a spell onto the Mega Gargant, could, and therefore Skragrott could kind of use him as a weapon. And he says that what's going to happen is the Bad Rune's going to rise, and it does when they go out into the kind of sea, to retrieve this item. The Bad Moon does appear, and Skragrott uses, he's got the Fangs of the Bad Moon, his special ability, and he causes tooth-like meteors to come down and damage the Stormvault so that they can get inside of it and retrieve this arcane item. Now, ultimately, in the story, they are foiled by a combined force of Sylvaneth, Fire Slayers, and Stormcast Eternals. And basically, to cut the long story short, the mountain collapses and the Basha Shard gets sealed once again under this kind of avalanche, and the items lost for the time being. The Merg brothers retreat, as do Skragrott and the Moonclan Grots, which is unsurprising. And that's what happens. And as I said, because the story continues then, and we go on to the next one, which was the one released on the 24th of December, titled In the Deep Dark Mountain. Because there's only like a very short period of time that elapses between the events, perhaps in the next kind of Battletome, we'll see, you know, the Sylvaneth, the Fire Slayers, and the Stormcast making an appearance. But let's talk about the summary of this story. It is on the Warhammer community website, so if you've not read it, I could, you know, highly recommend it. As I said to you, when I first read it, I thought it was good. I liked the ending the most, where kind of Gordrakk makes an appearance. But now, after reading the Sons of Behemat Battletome, realising that really it's a continuation of the story, it maybe provides some clues and some interesting ideas as to the next steps in the story. So, what happens is, in the Deep Dark Mountain, Slorgo, Brogruff and Mangor are recovering in a cave after being beaten by Goldies, which we can assume are the Stormcast Eternals. It mentions that Mangor had been in a foul mood ever since the light of the bad moon had slid behind the clouds and the crazy glint in his eye had faded altogether. It kind of shows the the nature of the Mega Gargants working alongside the Gloomspike Gits and the Oryx as well, because they are affected by this bad moon as well. You know, in a positive way, it says that the crazy glint's now faded, and he's been in a bad mood since it's disappeared. So obviously that the light of the bad moon has affected him, you know, in a way that he probably perceives as positive. It then goes on to say that his ankles and feet were a right mess. They'd been hacked near to the bone by the red-haired stunties during the disastrous attack on the Tuskvault in the south. So we're talking about the red-haired stunties. It's going to be the Fire Slayers, isn't it? It then goes on to say that when they were kind of in this cave waiting and recovering, they hear banging, and it's ogres from the Underguts Moor tribe, and they blast their way into the cave. And the Mega Gargants are actually frightened of them, because obviously with it being the Underguts Moor tribe, who are known for their lead belchers, the ogres kind of think back to stories they've been told where ogres have eaten Mega Gargants when they're alive, and also they recognise the cannons that the pipsqueaks like to make. Now, I know they mentioned that pipsqueaks is a term for kind of pretty much anyone smaller than them, which is most people, but we can kind of also assume that it refers to humans too. Well, they get into a brief scuffle with the ogre Moor tribes, but very shortly after that, the barricade that they've been piling up rocks behind them, gets battered down by a huge horned bull skull mounted on top of a colossal battering ram, which is pushed by Troggoths and Gargants, which kind of gives you an idea of the scale and the size of it. And on top of that is Gordrakk, and it kind of shows how his influence is spread, because the Mega Gargants, I think it's Slorgo, actually recognises him. And Gordrakk basically says, right, everyone stop fighting, you're all coming with me, and we're going to go and smash a city in the east. We can assume that is Excelsis. And everyone cheers, and they join this giant war to go with Gordrakk. And the Mega Gargants are really pleased about this. Again, it mentions about the pipsqueak humans, and the thought of kind of smashing their city really appeals to them. So it kind of got me thinking about those two stories and what's really interesting about both of them. So the first thing is this. It goes on to say, when we're reading the story, that Skragrott is too small to wield the Basha Shard, but maybe Gordrakk possibly could. And now that Gordrakk has led, Skragrott's gathering, he obviously knows that the Basha Shard is located in the Tuskvault, and maybe because it kind of cuts away from that, and we go to where the Mega Gargants are hiding in the cave. You never really see what Gordrakk does after the after the kind of failed kind of retrieval of the item at the Tuskvault, it just says that the Mega Gargants escape, Skragrott disappears, but maybe Gordrak is successful and does get that shard, which is potentially in the battering ram that's used in the siege against Excelsis. We just don't know. Perhaps it's lost for now, and maybe Gordrak will return for it in the future. Maybe it's even too big for Gordrak. You know, if it's something that a Mega Gargant could wield, you know, it's going to be absolutely massive. And we do know that Gordrak has got this battering ram, which is from one of the God Beasts. So he kind of already has got a weapon of destruction that he can use in his siege against the city in the east. The stories also talk about Skragrott and Gordrak working together. So, as we said before, that the peace in the deep dark mountain doesn't take place long after the siege of Tuskvault. If the next book is Gordrak in the Broken Realms narrative, then it's quite feasible that Skragrott could actually be working alongside him too. In the story, it said about the Ogre Morg tribes joining the giant war, so it's safe to assume that we'll see that kind of force within the forces of destruction working together. Because we've heard about the kind of retrieval of the item being foiled by the Sylvaneth, the Fyreslayers, and the Stormcast, it mentions about the Pipsqueaks with the cannons. Perhaps we'll see another chamber and humans with cannons during the siege of Excelsis, and maybe the Fyreslayers too, alongside the Sylvaneth. You know, it's easy to kind of think that maybe those factions would be near, or at least kind of within reaching distance if they were to follow the war. Now, recently I had done some videos about the Hammerhall Heralds, about, you know, the possibility of, you know, the human faction. I also did one about the Fyreslayers, and we've got another one here which is about the Stormcast Eternals seeking glory with a soul binding, and it says inquire at the Temple of Sigmar for more. So, you know, there is talk of those factions. I don't know whether it's coincidence or if it kind of is hinting that possibly those factions could make an appearance later on down the line. But I'd love to hear your comments too. The final thing that it made me think about is just to take a quote from one of the stories. It did remind me of one of the Rumour engines, and it was this one. So in the story in the Deep Dark Mountain, when the Mega Gargants are hiding in the cave, they say about how they're hurting, and Slorgo says that, you know, it goes on to say, they'd all taken a beating in some form or another, and had nothing to show for it but a fresh crop of injuries. He pulled an arrow out of the meat of his shoulder made of metal instead of wood. The projectile let fly a little crackle of electricity as he moved it. And it made me think of this with the arrows, because if you look where the flights would normally be, we can see actually there is lightning bolts instead. So maybe we'll see kind of Stormcast Eternals in the Siege of Excelsis with those kind of arrows that they were using to defend the Storm Vaults with. That was from a Rumour engine which was revealed on the 11th of October 2020. I'd love to hear your opinions. What do you think? Do you think the story's kind of revealed hints for the future? Do you think we'll see Gordrak and Skragrott working together? Do you think the Basher Shard will be recovered, or do you think it already has been? If you could drop me a comment below, that would be absolutely fantastic. I'd love to talk to you about it. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. I'm really looking forward to speaking to you soon and seeing the kind of next releases from Games Workshop, because I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. Thanks for joining me, and we'll speak soon. Bye.